Hello, my name is Alex Wiseman. This is screencast number 5, looking at economic globalization and talking about certainly the larger context of our conversation is globalization and contextualization related to comparative and international education. We have taken a big look at some arguments about economic globalization from our text and a specific chapter out of the Lechner and Boley Globalization Reader that was written by Robert Hunter Wade, called Is Globalization Reducing Poverty and Inequality? And we looked at the neoliberal and the leftist approaches to thinking about economic globalization and the ways that Wade actually tries to say that both of these arguments have some relevant points to them. It all comes down to how you look at the data and whether or not the phenomena really is a global phenomena, or if there should be some specific ways that we contextualize that, or in his case, remove some of the data, like China and India's data, in order to see what's going on in the rest of the world. Then we switched over to think about, all right, how do we connect this to education more directly? And we did that by looking at Chapter 7 out of The Schooled Society by David Baker. He laid out a human capital and then a more of a neo-Marxist approach first from Theodore Schultz talking about a human capital approach, then from Ronald Dorr talking about more of a neo-Marxist or a sociological sort of critical perspective on education that aligns with, these each align with the neoliberal versus left perspectives from before. And we said, or he said, Baker said, that both positions ignore the power of education as an institution. And then he went through 4 ways that mass education and work had become symbiotically connected, with the emphasis on mass education and education as an institution actually now driving the way that the labor market operates and that work operates, rather than the reverse. So we looked at the first, second, and third reasons that he gave. We had not yet gotten to the 4th reason. So he says the symbiosis between mass education and work is evident in a 4th way, in that the schooled employee of the schooled occupation in the schooled workplace does not just come about because of changes in many individuals' skill sets. In other words, that human capital approach just isn't working here. It is broad cultural change occurring over a considerable time period and in many unexpected ways. That is what creates the symbiosis, right? Broad cultural change. Now, over a considerable time period and in many unexpected ways, this is isomorphism. This is a word that you've heard from me before. Sorry, that's not spelled very well, but isomorphism. Right? But the idea of broad cultural change is one that we need to sit on for a while. Because remember when we were looking at our earlier discussions of more of the left approach, and we talked about economic and even cultural imperialism, that was a part of the left's argument, or the left's critique of the neoliberal argument. And we saw Martin Carnoy's old book on education as cultural imperialism, and used that as sort of an example of how we could think of economic and cultural and political globalization all being ways to embed power and resource interests in what happens in school. And I don't think anyone is denying that. Right? That's not something that anyone, even Baker or a more neo-institutional perspective, would deny. Not at all. Instead, what we're saying is that there's this broad cultural change that is happening. It's happening. Whether you're a neoliberal or you're a neo-Marxist, it doesn't matter. It's happening. The fact is, we have to think about how it happens. And it comes from the fact that the schooled employee in the schooled occupation in the schooled workplace has made education the dominant institution, not just in a small way, but over many other broad institutions as well. So perhaps institutionalized, embedded, and then influencing what happens more than society, perhaps more than the labor market, perhaps more than the economy. In that education operates, and the expectations and the broad cultural ideologies embedded in education operate independent of these other institutions, and in fact influence how they develop. Now that is the real crux of this argument, right? To recognize how important and how surprisingly influential and independent education as an institution has become. And so if we want to talk about globalization and economic globalization as well as cultural and political globalization, to ignore education as an institution is to really put blinders on. Is to say that you're not willing to look at what has become fundamentally one of the foundations for how we realize, how, and I mean that with a capital R, how we expect, how we understand, how we conceptualize, how we discuss all of these other elements of society or life or politics or whatever. All right. So that's the big statement there. When we talk about economic globalization, then, we have moved perhaps beyond our discussions of human capital theory and education as, the reproduction of power. Not that those don't exist. We're not denying that, but we're saying that those aren't the all-defining characteristics, and that both of those phenomena, or maybe I should say all of those phenomena, occur. But they occur within this larger, dominant, overwhelming institution of education. All right. We have a lot to discuss related to this. I'm looking forward to your comments both in class and on the discussion board, and I hope that you have questions and other things from the reading that you have pulled out that you think would be interesting to discuss. I'm looking forward to hearing what those are and to having that conversation with you. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you soon.